Welcome, college basketball fans, to the Full Court Press Podcast with LT and Sammy D. This is the podcast that brings you legendary stories from college basketball's golden era and dives in deep with a current analysis of today's game. Get ready for the most energetic and entertaining college basketball podcast around. Let's get it.
Hello and welcome to another Full Court Press podcast. Luke Taylor back in the studio after I didn't think I was going to get out of Pittsburgh alive. A lot of late games, but Luke Taylor, Sammy D on the other line. We are here to talk a little college basketball. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Biggest thing is pass the rock to your favorite college basketball fans. We are blowing up. We are kicking it on Instagram.
We know everyone's talking about college basketball. Share the love,
Share the love. Absolutely. And give us, what? We got another 5-star review. So thank you so much, whoever you are, wherever you are. That means a lot. And it doesn't mean you hate us. So, man, what a first week of college basketball.
College basketball tournament. Yeah.
Yes.
It's, you were there in the flesh. So I do want to get some insights. I'm going to ask you a couple questions about your experience over in Pittsburgh, because it's like, you must be exhausted.
Well, let's see. The first game Saturday was Oakland, North Carolina State, overtime.
Yeah.
And they also had the late game, 7, 10, and 9, I think 40. The second game, which was Oregon and Creighton, went to double overtime. My ass hurts right now.
Yeah. Yep. You paid for a hotel room that didn't get to use that much, There wasn't a whole lot of rest and relaxation for LT the past days.
No, I was getting after it, but I had a blast. My buddy Mike, who's our pseudo producer, he did an awesome job, man. He was like, "What do you need?" And he helped with getting a lot of content, just setting stuff up. Being a press conference, I would be in the locker room. We're able to kind of tag team back again.
Nice. So I want to ask you a couple questions.
Sure.
Like what? You had media credentials. You saw a lot of behind the scenes stuff, right?
Yeah.
Did it meet your expectations for like a round one?
I was surprised. I was surprised because you're in the dungeons of hell down in the main floor. I was surprised how much popcorn were in bags. There were honestly, I forgot to get a photo of it. I've never seen that much bag popcorn in my life. Like huge bags. Yeah, because expectations, absolutely. It was I didn't know. I shouldn't say that. I didn't know what to really expect. I knew it was going to be all access, to be on the court, to get interviews, to be in the interviews, to actually have a lot of one-on-one interviews. I interviewed DJ Burns, I think 3 times from North Carolina State. Oakland, Coach Kempe, and Jack Golick. I interviewed him probably 3 times. DJ Burns, the last time I saw him was after the game Saturday. First thing he said to me is like, "What's up, big dog?" So he knew who I was, which was cool. But
who do you think's more tired, you or DJ Burns? Here's NC State's like one of the storylines, right? They've won 7 games in 11 days, right? And
the coach was supposed to be fired.
Yeah. They finished conference regular season just awful, right? Like they weren't expected. ACC was in DC, was it? Conference tournament. And so they weren't even expected to get out of that, right? They made a run there, and now they're making a run in the tournament. Those guys must be exhausted. Did you talk to any of those guys? And especially
absolutely.
A big unit like DJ Burns, man. He was averaging 20, 25 minutes a game, and then in double OT, coach had him in there for 42 minutes.
Yeah, and he had to be. He is such a presence. And I tell you, when he touches the ball, the crowd there just goes nuts. It is so cool. He was kind of the villain against Oakland. Yeah. But he's a good kid, and they were exhausted, and coach is probably gonna. They will have they probably traveled back Sunday. They probably hopefully were able to sleep in Sunday. Monday's probably going to be an off day, maybe some media stuff, and then they'll get after it on Tuesday. They might do a little shoot around light practice Monday, but they need. Listen, at that age, you're on energy and emotion. And that building was buzzing. Like after Oakland beating Kentucky, that place was buzzing, both negatively for Kentucky fans and positively for everybody else. I mean, people were cheering for Oakland.
You did an awesome job keeping the Full Court Press podcast Instagram page up and alive during your time there. You got some great videos of the crowd, of the scene. You got some really good stuff of Kentucky. What was that like to see, like
the Beatles
in person?
I witnessed the Beatles. I witnessed the Beatles.
Even a down year like they've had this year, right? Like
they are so talented, but they're young. They're so young. And you look at Oakland, you have Trey Townsend, who's 6'6", and I actually talked to his dad,
photographer at the games.
Yeah, great guy, man. Skip Townsend, great dude. Shout out to the Townsend, great kid. I said to him after the game on Saturday, he just looked defeated. I said, hey, I want to tell you something, dude. You were a boss or an animal or something. You went double against Kentucky and North Carolina State 2 games in a row. So I know it sucks to lose, but dude, you're going to do big things. And the dad was just such a nice guy. He does sales for GM. Akron's his territory. So I hopefully keep in touch. He's great energy. Great. Yeah. And he's got, I don't know if he's, I do know, but I'm not, I do know, but I don't know what's going to happen with Trey Townsend, but I have an inclination of what's going to happen. But Jack Golke, what a great kid. I mean, didn't someone say like he's going to be selling insurance on Monday?
Yeah, I mean, they were like, hey, don't be surprised if like you're renting a car from Enterprise next year and Golke's handing you the keys. He's done like I've seen him with 2 NIL deals since that first round game. So
he was doing some with TurboTax, wasn't he?
TurboTax, and there's another one that popped up yesterday on my feed, and I was like, man, good for him.
North Carolina State is kind of the Cinderella story. Listen, I know we've been kind of down, both of us, you more than me, on Creighton. Seeing them in person, they are freaking big.
They're a big team. I mean, I'm down on them because I don't think that they should have lost a lot of the games that they lost this year. I mean, they were in a hard conference, but their non-conference schedule, getting beat badly by Colorado State, who we both really like.
Yeah, and only scored 11 points in the first half of their game.
I mean, it's kind of a weird tournament right now. Usually you have a little bit more double-digit seeds getting into the Sweet 16, and North Carolina State's the only double-digit seed that made it into the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
So it's not really like a Cinderella kind of type story unless NC State keeps pushing along. So we'll see.
I think that matchup with them for Marquette could actually favor them. North Carolina is fast, but they got some really talented big men. Really talented big men that a couple of them had a couple tough times with a couple of them had a tough time with one of my questions. The press conference is serious and it's a little bit jovial and joking. I'm like, you know what, LT's in there and you're pissed at me because I didn't say, you're supposed to say, your name and then your coordinates or whatever, who you're from. So I said Luke Taylor, Full Court Press podcast, and I was so tempted to say, hey, college basketball experience. And I will. Next time I will.
Chickened out there for a second, but
but you know what? You call it chicken now, but you weren't there, and I would have maybe got removed. I would have got a chuckle.
All I know is I've known LT for 20 years, little over 20 years.
Plus years. Yep.
You've never been one to shy away from.
No, it was but here's the thing. Everybody in the world in the media can, and I should have done it, and I will. But to go back to the tournament thing, it is amazing that there's really, like, if you look at the seeds still around, 1 is playing 4, 11's playing 2, 1's playing 5, 3's playing 2, 2's playing 6, 4's playing 1, 2's playing 3, 5's playing 1. So. You're seeing, obviously, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of 4 seeds. I think the 4 seed bar from Duke, well, in Alabama, but it seems like the 4 seeds,
2 out of the 4 seeds made it.
Yeah, 2 of the 4 seeds. But so, what do you think? I mean, you got the 16 teams. What do you think about some of the teams, how they did from the podcast? I'm kind of surprised we didn't get a little squeaker out with some of them, especially like Western Kentucky had Marquette on the ropes.
Nevada had a 16-point lead with 8 minutes left. Man, that was the heartbreaker for me because we're both Wolfpack fans. We've had Jared Lucas on the podcast twice, and we follow them pretty closely. And going into the tournament, they were one of the hottest teams to be up 16 points against Dayton. In the first, you got to win that game. That was the heartbreak. I mean, again, anything can happen, right? That was the heartbreaker to me. The Dukes from Duquesne, man. That was so you were in the state, you were in Pittsburgh when Duquesne knocked off BYU in a different city, right? But they made that announcement on the big screen, right?
They didn't make an announcement. They just were showing the game on the big screen.
Oh, okay.
And people were cheering, and I'm like, what are they cheering for? And I'm like, then a second later, I realized I started cheering too because I got personal connections.
It's just exciting. I mean, that's a great storyline, especially as Coach Dan Brock announced his retirement. He announced it between winning the conference tournament and their first round game, which talk about some motivation, to go out there and win an NCAA game for the Dukes, for Coach Dan Brock. That was awesome. Colorado State, I think they just ran out of gas. They won their first round in the first 4 and then just couldn't get anything started. I don't even want to go into the round of 64 game with them. Akron, man.
Akron started off well, but here's the problem. And I was talking to
and you saw that. You were there. They were.
I was there in the flesh.
I had Akron winning that game.
I did too.
And I'm like, and I said this game is going to go through Enrique Freeman, and the whole first half did.
Right. But here's the problem. He's a double score. And the problem is, if you're standing out at the 3-point line and you start missing, who's rebounding?
Sure.
I mean, you got to remember, Oakland is and I even said this, I think, to you. Oakland's tallest player, I think, was 6'8", 6'9". Dude, Kentucky had 4 guys over 6'11". They had 3 7-footers. And at halftime, I think Kentucky had 23 rebounds. Oakland had 22. And, I had to rebound a lot being 6'2", 6'2 and a half, 6'3" in high school and everything because, and it's just about attitude and effort and positioning and using your bootay. I mean, you look at Charles Barkley, you look at Dennis Rodman. I mean, they were elite.
DJ Burns now.
Yeah, DJ Burns. I mean, he's just wide. But
that stretch 4 position.
But I will tell you, Creighton in the second overtime is just a different level. And I saw a team, you're probably going to disagree with me. I saw a team that could potentially go to a Final Four if all things are fine. I mean, they can shoot. They're well coached. You got to remember now they got to go through Tennessee, which, and then they potentially have to go through Purdue or Gonzaga. I just don't see them winning 2 in a row to get to the Final Four, but they're talented enough. And what?
That was my thing. That was my issue with Creighton all along. I always thought that they could be a Final Four team, but they would always they would have 2 or 3 good games, and then they would just not play well a game. You can't do that in this tournament. So far, they've proven me wrong. They've played 2 great games, 40 minutes. And that's the name of the game in this tournament is who can play the best 40-minute game. Without letting your opponent go on 12, 15-point runs.
Right. What teams were you disappointed with, and what teams were you surprised with? And you can't say Kentucky.
No, I was disappointed in Baylor. When Baylor lost to Clemson, I thought Baylor was a team that could really make a run, knock off, Arizona and potentially give UNC in the Elite Eight a hard run. If not, I probably would have personally, I would have favored Baylor over UNC, and I like UNC a lot this year. But they were a team when they, I just didn't think they played very well against Clemson. But that's also the team that surprised me the most is Clemson, right? Yeah. Clemson had a really good first part of the season, and then you didn't hear too much from them.
And they beat the crap out of New Mexico. They beat them by 21 points.
I know. Clemson's the team that's really surprised me. And the whole ACC, right? I mean, you got 4 teams in the Sweet 16 from the ACC.
And the ACC was down this year. They were talking about maybe only getting 3 or 4 teams in,
right? And now I'm like, oh, yeah. it would have been great to see. I mean, Pittsburgh, like compete in this. So it's Clemson was a team that definitely surprised me. I want to say Gonzaga surprised me because, I know we're both big on McNeese.
They got throttled. McNeese got throttled.
I know. And I was like, that's either going to be a close game or McNeese is going to win. And again, it's the Zags were supposed to, they've supposedly had a down year, right? And now they're in the Sweet 16 for the 9th time in a row. So,
yeah, and Mark Few's been in the tournament the last 25 years. I mean, some of these stats here, it's like, Greg McDermott, Creighton's been in the Sweet 16 the last 3 of the 4 years. I mean, so were you a little like, okay, so those who else kind of like were you disappointed or surprised? I was surprised that James Madison handled Wisconsin because Wisconsin.
Yeah, me too. I think it could have gone either way. Wisconsin's a hot team. I had them beating James Madison in the first round, so that was a little disappointing. I think that first round matchup, like the combined talent on that team, on those two teams, was probably the best out of any matchup. Let's see, who else do we have? I mean, NC State obviously surprised me. But I don't know if they should or shouldn't. I just thought that they'd be exhausted by now with what they did in their conference tournament. So, yeah, I mean, I haven't really been big on SEC basketball all year. I watched some Tennessee throughout the year. I like Tennessee. Alabama, I think that they've had I think that they've probably had the hardest route to get into the Sweet 16. Beating a really good Charleston team and then beating a really good Grand Canyon team. So it's we'll see. I mean, UNC is hot. I have UNC winning that game. I saw a stat that Michigan State has never lost to North Carolina in the tournament.
Well, they just did.
I mean, never beaten them. Sorry, never beaten them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm gonna throw a stat out to you where it's like, so entering this tournament, there were 6 coaches who have won the national championship. There's only 1 left. Like, that just tells you like the shift of what's happening in the tournament. And the only guy who's left is Danny Hurley, who,
I mean, the guy here, 2 years ago, they would have had no one, right?
Right. I mean, the coaches are, Bill Self, Izzo, Scott Drew, Calipari, Tony Bennett. I mean, Tony Bennett hasn't won a game since they won the national championship, hasn't won an NCAA tournament game since they won the.
They said a game. I'm like, I didn't realize they're 0-30.
I know, yeah. Since they won the national championship, I think in 2019, I think it was, like, he has not won an NCAA tournament game since then. But Danny Hurley, I want to talk about him. Like, did you watch any of those UConn games?
Yeah, I mean, they're different. I mean, they're just different.
The amount of swagger that guy has, like, I love it.
Yeah, and they almost had a tough time with Stetson.
There was a couple minutes
bad joke.
there.
That's a bad joke.
Like
the
first 2 minutes or something, but it was. I watched the post-game locker room talk with Hurley and his team after they knocked off Northwestern. And he just said, yeah, we got our job done in Brooklyn. Let's go to the Boston leg and let's just keep smacking these teams around. And then he just walked out. And I was like, all right. Like, I mean, it's there's a different level of swagger that him and his team know that they belong here, know, and they know that this is just, it's, 4 more games and they're done for the season. And they expect to win every single one of them.
Yeah, and there was a couple games like Colorado didn't surprise me because we interviewed Tad and TJ a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago.
KJ Simpson.
KJ Simpson, and they looked really good against Florida. They looked really good against Marquette. They just had a couple possessions, and Western Kentucky looked really good against Marquette for a long period of time. So
I know you really like that matchup with Western Kentucky, and I mean, Marquette surprised me. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
So, and I watched a lot of Marquette games this year. I think it's me just losing faith in Shaka Smart in the tournament. Like there were so many years I had his team. I'm a big Shaka Smart fan. So many years I had his teams advancing to the Elite Eight, the Final Four, and he just kept getting these early round exits. So maybe this is the year. He moves into they're playing a hot North Carolina State team. I think that's going to be a really good game because both teams get some rest the next couple days. Both teams are very well coached. So, and then you get a Duke team that I don't know what to think of them. I thought that they were overrated to start the year. I think now they're underrated. They're playing a Houston team who probably could be, when they're playing their best, they're just as good as UConn. The problem with Houston is they do have every once in a while they have these 5 or 7 minute kind of lags where they let teams back into games. So that's going to be that South is going to be a section of the bracket I'm going to be looking at pretty closely. I want to watch every minute of both of those games.
The North Carolina State Marquette, Duke Houston.
Yep.
I like the I kind of want to see how Creighton's going to do against Tennessee. I'm really looking forward to that North Carolina Alabama game. That Illinois Iowa State game is going to be really good too.
Yeah.
Both great coaches. They both have some high octane offense. UConn and San Diego State. I mean, San Diego State is
rematch from last year's championship.
I know, and I'll be curious to see. I mean, San Diego State, Ledee is just a beast, and Ducher's a great coach. I'll be curious to see how they go. I just think UConn has way too much, just way too much.
Yeah, I mean, it's Donovan Clingan, 7-2 center for UConn. Like last game against Northwestern, put 14 points, 14 boards, and 8 blocks. Like it's like you said. I mean, UConn's different.
Yeah, they are. So we talked a little bit about Western Kentucky. We talked about Colorado. We talked about some other teams. Let's talk about coaching changes.
Ooh.
So there's been kind of a couple expected coaching changes. There wasn't a lot of movement. DePaul hired Chris Holtmann, who was let go from Ohio State. He started to put together a nice little staff. What do you think about that hire for DePaul?
I think the timing was right. I think athletic director and vice president of the university, Dwayne Peavy, did the right thing. I think if he would have waited another day or two, it could have been a disaster for DePaul.
You think so?
Yeah. I mean, I think you needed to hire somebody who was available before, like a Holtmann, before a lot of these positions opened up, right? And I think Peavy's done this long enough where he knows the timeline during conference tournaments and, the first couple rounds of NCAA, like all these moving pieces are going to start happening. He needed to get somebody who has had success, head coaching experience, has had success in both the Big East as well as the Big Ten. And like, I thought it was moving into it. I don't know if it was my number one pick, right? Because I didn't know if Holtmann would be able to succeed with the resources that DePaul has historically had. But when the announcement came out, I thought that the DePaul team did a really good job saying we've hired Chris Holtmann, but we've also improved our resources that are going to support his success, right? And that's the key, right? A coach can make all the difference in the world, but at the end of the day, like DePaul needs to go out and build a roster. And so I thought the timing was great. I thought getting a coach in there before 25 new jobs opened up for Holtmann to consider was great. I thought getting a head coach in there a week before the transfer portal opens up was the right move to get kind of first look at some of these guys and build a roster around. I think committing to an NIL program that same week that they got Holtmann is a huge success. So I'm really happy with the hire at DePaul. I don't expect DePaul to be in the bottom of the Big East next year.
Second last, baby.
No, I mean, I would not be surprised to see DePaul in that kind of 6 through 8 next year. Right.
Okay. Wow.
And I think it's based on seeing who Holtmann's hired, the past week as his assistants, as well as we've got to witness a lot of programs do quick 1-year turnarounds based on how well they do in the transfer portal, right?
Yep.
And kind of having a clean slate and not trying to fill 1 or 2 positions, and having a new head coach like Holtman who can go in there and build a completely new roster. I think that's really going to help DePaul.
Yep. Okay. So let's talk about West Virginia. So that just obviously that opened up. That was the first opening of the year, had an interim head coach. They hired former guest Darren DeVries, Drake University, going to West Virginia. What do you think about that fit? I mean, they're going to get a stud player with them.
Yeah. I think DeVries is a great coach. It's surprising. You know, you and I talked off the air. Maybe it was like 4 or 5 days ago. Maybe I think it was when you were driving up to Pittsburgh, and I was like, I just would not be surprised if DeVries went into a Power 5, Power 6 program to give his son Tucker, who is the 6th leading scorer in the country this year, who's sticking around for another year. Rumors, are projected to say that, and then he's going to follow his dad where he goes. Tucker's going to have a new spotlight based on his dad's movement. And I do think that probably played into a little bit of the decision. One, being on the East Coast where you're going to get more viewership, right, from the media. 2, being in the Big 12. So there won't be any NBA scouts to go to Tucker and be like, oh, you haven't played a competitive schedule all year, right? We don't know how you're going to compete against some of the best players in the country on a day-to-day basis. I'm excited for that. We had Tucker on the podcast a week ago, and Mike, when you watch, his highlight reel, when I watched, that first round game against Washington State, like as well as the conference final, Missouri Valley Conference final against Indiana State. I mean, Tucker's the real deal. And I think everybody knew that on paper, but not many people put eyes on Drake on a weekly basis. And next year, the whole country's going to just see how good this kid is.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think about Ohio State and Michigan? So Michigan let go Juwan Howard early last week, and have already secured a commitment from Dusty May, formerly of FAU. Ohio State obviously let go Chris Holtman about 3-4 weeks ago, and promoted associate head coach Coach Diebler up to the full-time head coach position. What do you think about those 2 hires?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with Ohio State. I mean, with Diebler, I think it's the right thing to do the way he finished the year, right? I think he shocked the country with how well they did, in all honesty. Which adds an extra question mark to the whole Holtman scenario, right? Like, why can Diebler do so well when Holtman couldn't with that crew? And there's so many different variables associated with that. But going back to DePaul, both DePaul and Ohio State were able to hire without having to pay any buyout clauses. So that's huge, right? And Ohio State to be able to offer that to Diebler, you're closer to the pulse of Ohio State with your location. I'm interested to hear what their fan base and alumni think of the hire. I'd imagine they're fairly pleased with it.
I mean, you put him to interim, and then he beats Purdue at home,
right?
And then he wins another game. It's like,
I think it would have been a bad move for them not to do it.
Well, I think there was a couple moving parts. So there was talk like Lamont Paris, who's originally from Ohio. He's at South Carolina, has done a great job. He resigned. He re-signed for an extension. So that takes him off the table. I think there were some back channels. I'm sure they might have tried to reach out to Dusty May's people, and they said, we might not be interested or what have you. So listen, it's I'm sure his buyout's not going to be bad. So, hey, let him go. And I'll be curious to see how many players leave.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. I know he's going to lose
players and coaches, right?
Well, yeah, a couple. I think 1 or 2 coaches are going with Coach Holtman to DePaul, which, that's understandable. So that'll be curious. Michigan, I was a little bit surprised they fired Juwan Howard. I thought for sure he'd get 1 more year being an alumni, but you just never know what's happened in the room. And also, too, some of the big boosters could have been like, you know what, this is not good. We need to move forward. So the Dusty May hiring is interesting because he's done a great job at Florida Atlantic.
Dusty Mays, that was the hottest name. That,
yeah,
you know, it was kind of like, okay, the top programs who have had vacancies, they all wanted Dusty May, or at least wanted to consider him and put an offer out to him. I do believe that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll let you
How
finish.
will he do at Michigan?
I think he'll do pretty well, in all honesty. Like, I think it's, but again, you know, we talk so much, and all these coaches know that instead of, you know, 4 or 5 years to figure out a program, they have like 1 or 2 years now, right?
It's like 1 or 2 minutes, not 1 or 2 years. I mean, that's the problem. You can't build a program in 1 or 2 years. You just can't. I'm sorry. I don't care with NIL and that stuff. That you got to build a culture.
I agree. I think so. I'll put it this way: from a fan's perspective, I think Dusty May is a better coach than Juwan Howard.
Yes.
I think Juwan Howard had better recruiting potential into Michigan. So, I mean, Juwan Howard, I'm sorry, you're not going to convince me that getting Terrence Shannon, Caleb Love, and Hunter Dickinson all on a potential roster this year, like, they wouldn't have been a top 5 program all year. And supposedly the reason all 3 of those guys weren't part of that team this year didn't really have a whole lot to do with Howard, right?
Nothing to do with Howard. It had to deal with their transfer credits, at least the
transfer credits, and then Dickinson transferred for better NIL. So it's like all that stuff, you know. So and then the guy had heart surgery at the beginning of the year. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, there were some off-court incidents that probably led to people wanting to get rid of Howard.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could have seen another year with him, because I do think what he was building at Michigan, if he was able to figure out the transfer portal, figure out building an NIL program there, I think that they would be one of the best teams in the Big Ten year and year. So it's Dusty May. I think he's going to do really well there. I think he's going to fit in with what Michigan wants from a PR perspective. He's not going to ruffle a lot of feathers, which that's just a personality thing, right?
Yeah.
Will he be able to recruit up there? I don't know if he'll be able to do it in year 1, because he came from the Midwest, right? I think he was like wasn't he like
went to Indiana?
He was student manager for one of Bobby Knight's teams.
Yep.
So, I mean, he's familiar with the area. College basketball has become much more or less borderless today as compared to 10, 15, 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I just don't know if he can do it in next year. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
So what do you think about the UIC opening? No, I'm just kidding. So it's going to be interesting talking about UIC. The Missouri Valley is going to have a whole bunch of new coaches. Drake, Southern Illinois, UIC. I think there's Missouri State. I feel like I'm missing one. And then also all with the transfer.
Schertz is going to stick around? Do you think he's going to?
You know,
like, he was the hot name until they lost one game. I thought he was going to be a better fit for West Virginia than DeVries. Just Schertz's background and kind of the West Virginia culture. And I actually think that championship game decided who West Virginia was going to hire.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. You know, the one school that I've heard Schertz's name tossed around a little bit is SLU, St. Louis University.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they've got a really good program, really good backing. I think they have a pretty good NIL program too.
Yeah.
St. Louis is a good city. They don't have pro basketball, so that's kind of their basketball team, just like Kansas is in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
You know, does he leave, and does Robbie Avila go with him? I don't know. Does he stay? Does he see a now that DeVries is out from Drake, does he see an easier path to get to the NCAA tournament? You know, another team that you sent me a text before, Danny Sprinkle has accepted the Washington job. I think he'll do great there. I just don't know about Washington basketball, especially going to the Big Ten. I think that's going to, I just don't know how much of an uphill battle is, but Danny Sprinkle, I mean, can recruit. He can, I think that's a good fit because I think he's kind of a Montana, Colorado guy. So that'll be a good fit. The one interesting program which has not made a move is Louisville. They have not hired anybody. Supposedly, they thought they were going to get Dusty May, which obviously is not the case. Where do they go now?
I mean, they wanted Dusty May. When that fell through, they wanted Scott Drew.
He wasn't leaving Baylor. I'm sorry.
No. I think that job is like one of the best in the country. Like, it just needs to be the right coach. Right.
You're real high because they support the program.
That's my point. Like, I mean, we talked about Scott Drew. You and I were texting back and forth last night, and I was just like looking up comparisons with Baylor and Louisville. Like, Baylor spends 13, 14 million a year in men's basketball, and Louisville spends like 23, 24 million per year in men's basketball.
Wow.
So, you get they're hungry. Did you hear the story about when Oakland knocked off Kentucky? Like the Oakland apparel in Louisville,
$8,000.
Yeah, like it's like, I mean, that just I love stories like that because I'm like, these people like live and die college basketball,
Yeah.
And
what else you got other than thoroughbred racing and bourbon?
Yeah, right. It's like, what a great life. Like, as you're saying things, I'm like, thoroughbred racing, bourbon, college basketball. I'm like, all right, like full court press.
Sign me up.
Like,
yeah, we need to go to Kentucky, but
I think Louisville's one of the best coaching jobs in the country.
Who do you want there?
With the right person.
I know who you want there.
I mean, I think Will Wade would do incredible there. I think if Will Wade got that job, Louisville would win a national championship in the next 3 years.
Wow. That's a bold statement.
I think someone like him with a program that supports men's college basketball like Louisville, the sky's the limit. Like, that guy will do whatever it takes to win. He will dominate the transfer portal. He will have a competitive team in their conference in year one. They would make the tournament in year one. And like, I just think that he's the next big thing in men's college basketball. He's already done it. Yeah. He just had one blemish on his record that in today's world would be completely legal.
Trailblazer.
Like, that's what you called him on our podcast.
Allegedly.
Nah, it's not allegedly. It's
allegedly in my heart.
Sure.
That's all it counts. Do you see him leaving McNeese, though? Do you see him leaving McNeese? Yeah.
For the right opportunity. I think he's a smart enough guy. He reminds me of a politician. Like, when we had him on the podcast, I'm like, he's just saying the right things. He's been trained throughout his years. And the guy's only 41 years old. And so, yeah, like, his best years are ahead of him. And like, I mean, he won the SEC in his 30s. Like, it's, you put a guy like that with his coaching staff, with, his ability to recruit and transfer good sophomores, juniors, seniors into the program. Like, it's only going to make it easier for him with a NIL budget that like Louisville has, and the resources that they've put together to make that program good. I also think that getting Will Wade is going to be a less expensive option for Louisville, knowing that they're still paying Kenny Payne and Chris Mack just a boatload of money. And so, yeah, I mean, he would be my top pick for Louisville. I do think that there's a little bit of a risk there, but and I think Louisville is at a point right now where they want to be risk adverse. And I think that's why they were going after like a Scott Drew and a Dusty May. So we'll see. I mean, Louisville needs to pull the trigger on somebody because it's getting really, since the time they let Kenny Payne go.
Did you just hear the latest news?
What's that?
Mark Byington from James Madison's going to Vanderbilt.
Oh yeah, okay.
That just popped, and I know Louisville had shown some interest in Mark Byington.
Yep. So I don't know. I mean, we're going to be getting new announcements every day for the next 4 weeks, probably. You know, I think there's 40 positions that have opened up so far this year. 14 or 15, 16 of them are filled, something around there.
But Louisville especially needs to move because they're eventually going to lose out on the transfer portal, because that is going to, I mean, there's more kids now this year than there is last year by quite a few hundred, and it's only going to get busier as the season winds up. So what do you think about Mick Cronin at Louisville? There's been talks to him because he was with Rick Pitino on his staff as an assistant there.
I like it. He's somebody who always surprises me in the regular season.
Not this year at UCLA.
No.
Great coach.
Great coach. He doesn't get me excited though.
I was going to make a comment, but that would be weird. So,
let's keep it PG.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think? What do you think about Oklahoma State? And now that Dusty May is left or leaving for Michigan, what do you think about the FAU job? Let's talk about Oklahoma State first. I know we talked about Will Wade.
Yep.
Where else do they go? You know, a name that's not being tossed around a lot is Steve Lutz. 2 teams, 3 years, NCAA tournament, and almost beat and had a great game against Marquette.
I know you're really hot and heavy on Lutzy. It's he's a guy who deserves some offers. I mean, I think people see his path, like you said. I mean, 3 teams, 3 tournaments. And then before that, he was the one who recruited Zach Edey at Purdue. Like, I mean, his resume is built, right?
Creighton, yep.
I just don't. I want to see him win a round or 2 in the NCAA tournament before he goes to a Power 6 school.
Yeah, but that's hard to do at a mid-major.
Not when you're building a program. I think he needs to stick around at a mid-major for more than a year.
He did. He stuck at Texas A&M Corpus Christi for a couple years.
Yeah.
You got to, Sam, I'm going to teach you something. You
need
to strike while the iron is hot.
Yeah. Well, my point is his iron hot?
Baby, his iron's hot. It's steaming. It's raining.
No, I don't think so. Like, and that's where I'm like, okay, if he wins a game or 2 in an NCAA tournament, he wasn't even going to make the tournament if they didn't win their conference.
But what did they do?
They won their conference.
Win.
Yeah, but like they weren't even going to be in the NCAA tournament if they didn't.
Let me ask you something. How many mid-major teams won 2 games in the NCAA tournament? 0.
Mm-hmm.
How many mid-major teams won a game in the NCAA tournament?
Just a handful.
2. I'm counting. 3.
For our listeners, we do not consider Mountain West or A10 mid-major.
4.
Yeah.
Mountain West, A10, and American are not mid-major. So 4 teams, mid-major teams, won a tournament game.
Mm-hmm.
I could see a Steve Lutz in Florida at Florida Atlantic. You know who else I could see at Florida Atlantic, who I'm surprised is not getting a lot more traction, is Tom Crean.
Yeah.
I think he's a great coach.
I agree.
I think he's a great coach. And I think in the right situation, he will thrive. You know where I'd like to see Crean? Is UIC.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Chicago, baby.
I don't know. I don't think Tom Crean is going to go to a program that's not Power 6. I think he's been there, done that. I don't think he's going to take an FAU job. I certainly don't think he's going to take a UIC job.
Okay, that's kind of mean toward my UIC faithful. Don't even get me started. I'll sing the alumni song. UIC, do. Okay, but here's the thing with Florida Atlantic. That's a good program. And if you look at their football program, you don't think a guy like Tom Crean, who kind of, he started off really well at Indiana, then he kind of faltered a little bit. Yeah, but Indiana's different. There's no such thing as a blue blood anymore. And then he went to Georgia, which I just didn't think that was a good fit for him.
No, neither did I.
But what are blue bloods anymore? Let's finish up with that. What's a blue blood? They're non-existent. Kentucky's not a blue blood anymore.
For sure.
Not a blue blood.
Bite your tongue. Like, why? Because like
UIC.
What? You're always gonna have blue blood programs. Yeah.
Are you really?
For sure. Yeah. Like, there's
a
reason people go to Lawrence, Kansas to play basketball.
Okay, tell me who the blue bloods are right now.
There's a reason that, when you go to a UNC Duke game, it's just different there. Right. There's a difference there's a reason why Calipari, has a lifetime contract.
Be careful with that, because everybody on Instagram and Twitter are ready to freaking kill him.
I know. Not everybody, just the 80% of people who don't understand basketball.
That's kind of a mean slight. But okay.
But it's
there goes our listenership by 85%.
That's all right. No, Kansas is a blue blood. Kentucky's a blue blood. North Carolina's a blue blood.
UConn?
Ducon's a blue blood.
Ducon or Yukon?
In Duke. Did I say Ducon?
You said Ducon.
you like transferred the Yukon into my mouth, because I was thinking like UConn's one of those where if they win this year, they're a blue blood.
Oh yeah, 2 in a row.
Yeah, I wouldn't put them in that blue blood category, because they do have a lot of off years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think a program like Indiana has fallen out of the blue blood category. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, you're not going to convince me that like Duke, North Carolina, Kansas, and Kentucky like are year after year blue blood programs.
I don't know anymore. I'm still insulted with the UIC complex.
I said there's no way.
Not a good job.
That Tom Crean. I didn't say it's not a bad good job. I said Tom Crean's not going there.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm just a little bit hurt by it, but I think I've had enough of you, and I think we need to stop, because you're hurting my feelings. And you know what? We're going to. I'm going away for a little soiree with my family. Then we'll be back at the Final Four. We are going to the Final Four, folks. The Full Court Press Podcast, a college basketball experience, which I will say proud and loud all week, are going to get the Final Four.
Are you going to be in the pool in Mexico? Just like
I'm going to be so tan. I'll be so tan.
And you got a birthday coming up. Is you turning 50?
48. Sorry for any of our under 18 listeners and have sensitive ears. I called Sam an asshole.
LT's got a birthday in the next week, so everybody wish the best thing you can get LT is some 5-star reviews.
Yes, sir. So don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Like Sam says, I want some 5 stars. Hey, you want them on your college basketball team? We want them in our life. 5-star reviews on Apple or Spotify. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Or sorry, not Facebook too, which you're doing a great job with, and down below on our YouTube. And yeah, we'll be back next week at the Full Court Press Podcast, a college basketball experience.
Let's get it, LT.